If your nib's too slow and your ink won't flow, here's one of the places that you can go. Larry is here to help you through with Mr. Announcer and Cubby too. It's Larry's Fountain Pen Reviews.
First of all, let's welcome Adam. He's the ink guy on the YouTube channel. So, if you want to ask anything about inks, there's your man, Adam, the ink guy. And he's going to help you, okay? Because I'm not the guy to help you. I can just tell you it's a cool color, it's not a cool color. Well, hello, Miss Marilyn. How you doing, boy? How you doing?
Hi, Larry. How are you? Are you having a
great,
nice day?
sweetie. I'm great. Good to see you on. So,
Good to see you
okay.
too. Hi, Adam.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi, everybody.
So, here we go. Adam, welcome. Welcome. And Adam, it's your show. Go for it, buddy.
Yeah,
Like that's
I don't know.
okay.
I know that, you know,
Okay.
I just put out ink videos because I like to change my ink every day. That's pretty much it, really. Anything I come up with that of data that I'm doing was just questions I had in what did it mean for someone to say something was dry or something was wet.
Okay.
So that's the only reason I started doing that.
So how long have you been doing the inks thing now, Adam?
The videos,
Right.
I think I started January last year, so it's been about a video every day since then.
What got you started to do this?
The videos?
Yeah,
Starting
no,
the videos
to get
was
into
really,
ink. To get into the ink thing.
well, my first pen was a cross, and I had blue-black cartridges, and that was it. And I used blue-black cartridges for years.
Okay.
Because that's all I could find. That's all I knew. And I was perfectly fine with it. So I had a medium cross pen with blue-black cartridges, no converter, no bottles, didn't know even where to find any of it. And then I eventually stumbled across some of it, which opened up looking around at all these other things, which led to some pens, a whole bunch of different inks. Led to a period of time where I did not like the cross pen, but that was probably just because it was the only pen I used for a couple of years.
Okay.
I didn't like blue-black for a while for that same kind of reason. I've come back to where, blue-black's one of my favorite colors to use. But
Yeah, blue-black is one of my favorite colors. I like a rich, dark black. In your opinion, what's your flavor on that one? Cross? Would that ring a bell for a nice black?
for black ink, something that's really common is people go looking for what is the blackest of black inks. That's what they're looking for.
Right.
And I think if we stop looking at swatches to find certain colors, like I don't do swatches for the color. I do swatches to do the testing on.
Okay.
And that's because I've seen like black inks that look dull in a swatch. They look much lighter. They don't look like they're going to perform very well, but in the writing, they do great. So
Okay.
when you look at an ink, I'm looking at the writing sample of the ink to see what it's really going to look like, not the swatch.
Okay.
So as far as black inks and trying to find a darkest black ink, honestly, most of them out there do a really good job at being a good solid black without, like, I don't like shading in black ink. A lot of them do a really good job at that without having to chase for a new one.
This here is my favorite black ink, Diatramentus Archive Black. It's very thick and very good for calligraphy. It doesn't spread out on a page if you have a very thick line for calligraphy or flex pen. So I'm almost out.
Okay.
Yeah, I think sometimes when I've tested some inks, I think some inks age. And my Diatramentis archive ink was much more gray. It was like a dark gray in the writing, and I think mine had aged. But you know, without going and getting a bottle to test those things out, that's what I look at on it. But the archive ink is incredibly water resistant.
Yeah, it's good for
Hey,
water resistance.
So here's a question for you, because I really don't know the answer to this one. Is how long does ink last? They say if you leave it in a drawer away from the light, it lasts forever. And then I heard it gets molded and goes bad. So what's the story on that?
I don't know. I think there's a lot of factors going on that we're not even really considering. And it's not like I'm trying to say it's too much to consider, but I have 4 inks that I have in a window that has been in a window for over 2 years. And like every 6 months I go and I pull a little bit of ink out of there and I write with it, because I was trying to see, is it really going to just get washed out? You know, when people talk about it getting destroyed in the sunlight, it's an intermittent light window. So I'm not being crazy and putting it out in the middle of Florida sun all day, all the time to see how I can destroy it. It's just in a window that gets intermittent light. And I want to say there's 4 different inks there. One of them is affected, that it's not as vibrant as it was. But there's a little dulling that occurs. I'm not saying go put your inks in the sunlight. I don't think that the concern is as big as people make it out to be. You know, if you use 1 milliliter of ink a day in writing, so if you use one pen and empty that 1 pen out every day writing, you're going to burn up a bottle in a month.
Okay.
Or less.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do a whole lot of writing. I mean, when I get up in the morning, before I go out, when I'm home, in the evening before I go to bed, I do a lot of journaling, a lot of writing. Then I take a lot of notes when I'm doing my history for my review. So I stay pretty busy with it. One thing I wanted to ask you, now everybody's different and they have their own ways of doing it. I always heard that Noodler's Bay State Blue was a culprit and a nib destroyer. And I've used Noodler's Bay State Blue since 2015. I continue to use it, one of my favorite blues. I've done a test and done a video on this. And
I remember you did a video where you had a couple nibs sitting in Bay State Blue for a long period of time.
Yeah, and it didn't destroy the nib, so I don't know what ink they were using, but I did use Noodler's ink, and it didn't hurt the nib. So I don't know how other people came up with that. I'd love to find out.
This is perfect for today. Everybody says that it destroys like this type of coloring. They do it like a heat thing, and several nibs that have this that I won't use Noodler's inks with, because several people have said that if you have a coated nib or a colored nib, or something with a coating on it that's been heat set into the nib, that it will distort the color. I don't know if it'll ruin the nib for writing purposes, but the color, I think, is what they're talking about.
Adam, what's your take?
I honestly don't know. I haven't gotten around to testing the Bay State Blue yet, but I don't know. There's so many things that I feel like, yes, that ink, I've used it. I just haven't put it through any kind of testing. Well, yes, it can stain a pen. It's not permanent staining. It can be washed out. I don't know, when I've written with it, I didn't have anything melt from it, where I've read where people say that. Yeah. I'm not going to say stuff doesn't happen.
Yeah, it didn't destroy my nibs at all. I mean, I'll take it that it probably will remove any coating off the nib, the color off the nib. But as far as on my side, destroying a nib didn't happen. So, you know, and I was waiting to see if that was going to actually happen, and it didn't. So, but yeah, can it ruin some bags in your pen? Probably. I guess the chemical compound that's they use in the ink, some are stronger than others, so it could possibly happen. But again, I don't use Bay State Blue in my bags, in my ink fillers that have bags, because it's already hard enough to clean out a pen good with a bag. At least for me, it's a lot of, you know, filling and expelling the ink. Has anybody had problems with Noodler's ink?
This is an ink that is no longer with Noodler's, but Chris Sines got a very large bottle of this Noodler's King Philip Requiem, and she sent me a sample. And before reading the note saying that it would stain the pen, I put it in this here Noodler's Ahab, and you can definitely tell that the ink, it's been stained.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it might. I've never had a pen like fall apart from or have any O-rings problems. I've never had any of that, but this is the only pen that's ever been stained like permanently. It will not come out. I wore a shirt.
Yeah, but see what I
was just gonna say that I've never had a pen that has had any problems with any of the inks that I've had. They're just, sometimes they stain, and I wore a white shirt the day that I did this, and I got a stain, and I washed it, and it's been washed twice now, and it is still stained. So
I use bleach to get mine out. Sometimes I have to leave it overnight, but
yeah,
if it takes it out, it doesn't ruin the pen.
Bleach won't do it. No,
It does it for mine. Yeah, it's done it for my pens. So I don't know why it's not doing it for you, but it works on mine. So that's what I keep on doing.
King Philip Requiem is, you gotta watch out for it. No, I bleached this for over 3 days, and it is still discolored.
Wow.
Well, I think it's funny because I have had inks that have discolored parts of pens, but I don't understand then the push to really have a pen look like it's never been used. And I'm not saying that in any kind of a bad way, but I use an ink up, and I clean my pen out. And if the converters, for instance, because I see that quite a bunch where the converter may have a little discoloration, and I put another ink in, it doesn't affect the new ink, so I move on. And I do the same thing with demonstrator pens. And the funny thing is, because I'll note down for myself that, oh yeah, it had a weird red tint, you know.
And Adam, I've noticed, being on the outside of the pen community a little bit, that I would say there are two groups of pen people. There are collectors and there are users, and it seems to be the collectors that get upset about their pen being less than perfect condition. The users don't care; they just want to be able to use the pen.
And you know, that could be it. It would depend. I don't have any pens I don't have a focus to how I get pens. But I mean, I don't know. I don't even see that there's really a difference between the collectors and the users on a lot. And I do understand that some people, and good for them, they have a focus of what they want their fountain pens to be. So they will focus their purchasing on models and things like that. And that's great. And if they don't use a lot of their pens for that reason, that's fine. Even most of the people saying, well, I'm a user, not a collector, have more pens than they can, use at an individual time. And I don't consider myself a collector, but if people looked at what I had, they would say I collect fountain pens, So I'm going to say somebody who has that whatever vintage pen that they like to get every version of that model, yes, they could be a collector. And yes, I could understand them being quite a bit touchier about what goes into the pen.
So let's go to move right along to Aurora Black. Is that really a nice, rich black?
Yeah, it's a perfectly good black ink. It's not one that I, have a preference towards, but not out of anything other than, people choose, I like this one over that one for, I'm going to say, really arbitrary reasons. I do think it's a great wet ink as far as the flow that you really get. And I'm saying wet, and I'm not talking about the viscosity in the testing, because its viscosity is normal.
Here's one for you. Pelican inks, are they a dry ink in your opinion or not?
No, not really, but I understand from using them where people call it a dry ink and how it feels. Because I get that it feels that it writes a bit drier. I do think there's an advantage to putting manufacturer inks in manufacturer pens. So I've seen some, and everybody has, this pen doesn't like this ink, but I don't know that I'm not liking a Pelican ink.
Okay. Does anybody here have any questions they want to ask Adam? Feel free. So anybody have any questions for Adam? All right, go ahead, Dan.
Okay. Well, I apologize for coming in late. And I so appreciate you having this this discussion of inks, because I'm pretty much a newbie and I'm studying all I can about inks. And there's some things that I have come across that I wanted to ask you about. A couple of things. One is the wet versus dry ink. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about was permanent inks versus I think it was Mont Blanc has like a mystery black, and they have a permanent black. And I was reading one discussion somewhere that suggested that a newbie like me should stay way away from permanent inks until I know what I'm doing with them. And I'm not sure what all that means, but then the idea came up to me when you said about the staining, if perhaps the staining was related to a permanent kind of or archival kind of ink versus a non as such. I'm throwing 2 or 3 questions together, but
no, I gotcha.
Okay.
What I think is that I think the reason they might suggest someone to stay away from a permanent ink starting out is you're not as right when I started filling from the bottle, people aren't as confident. So if you make a mistake and you spill it, then it's much nicer to have spilled a washable ink.
They did mention that. But,
that's the first thing I would really think when they say that. As far as the permanent, I've actually never had a permanent ink. That's a mistake. I'm wrong. I've only ever had one permanent ink that was difficult to clean out of a pen, and that was white.
Oh.
Yeah, and it was really, really stubborn with the feed. But that wasn't something that I thought much of in worrying about it. I think more when I look at permanent inks, if I need permanent, I have certain inks I use. So if I know I need permanent and I know I need black, I know what I go to. But other than that, I don't even worry too much about permanent personally. Okay. I just use whatever color.
How many inks out there aren't labeled as permanent, but are more permanent than? Or is there something?
I think they tend to. It's weird because I think it's weird anyway. I see people worrying about how permanent an ink is in fountain pens, but they don't worry about the same thing with their ballpoints. Like you don't think to go, well, how permanent is my ballpoint pen? Mm-hmm. Which was the reason that I started really saying, what does it do for a highlighter? Because that was about the extent of what I care for on a ballpoint. So an ink, if it says archival, if it says document, that's usually telling you that you have a very permanent ink.
Okay, document or archival? Or...
Yeah, usually that's an indication that it's permanent.
Okay, would this come into the wet dry thing at all?
No, it's not a wet dry. Wet dry is just talking about really how the ink feels flowing.
Okay.
So as an example, if you were to try a KWZ ink, so the brand KWZ, it's going to feel incredibly wet under the nib, but it's its actual wet dryness, it's completely normal. Most all inks are really going to be very, normal. It's completely normal, but it feels very dry.
Well, if I have a pen with a nib that is what I would call like a wet nib kind of a pen, where it just seems to pour out more than the others, not puddling or anything in a bad way, but I mean, just it seems to really, really lay a lot of ink out there. Should I try to get a drier kind of ink for a pen like that, or
Does it do that for all of the inks or just certain ones?
well, I'm so new I can't answer that. I'm not thinking it's not a bad thing. I'm just thinking like I've got one pen that I can think of that it's just got a real, it's a medium nib a pen, but it really lays a lot of ink out so that it is a pretty good wide. If I got my letters too small together when I'm writing, well, then it's going to fill that space in a little bit more than if I round it out.
Okay. Yeah, so it causes a little bit of spreading in the writing.
Yeah.
And there is a way to make a pen a little bit drier. And it's not so if you have a very inexpensive pen, so if you're going to ever experiment with something, use a cheap pen to experiment,
Yeah.
Obviously. But when you've got the 2 tines,
Yeah.
the way that you can actually get it to be, because if they're apart a little bit and you need them a little closer, you can actually pinch them with your fingers so that the tines are going to actually come out of alignment under and over like that a couple times. And what you're doing is if the 2 tines are actually like this, you can bring them together a little bit. But being willing to do all of that on a pen, I would not experiment with doing that for the first time on my Sailor pen, but I absolutely would say, you know what? If I'm going to try it, then maybe I go buy a Jinhao and I try it on a Jinhao.
I would try it with a different paper.
That could be the other thing is I have all of the paper and I can tell you that paper makes a very big difference. On my bullet journal, for example, I have, this is very not friendly, fountain pen friendly paper, and the littlest, I'll show you, but like some papers, they tend to feather way more than other papers. Like you can definitely see it looks like a chicken. But like if you use the same paper, the same ink on, say, another paper, like it looks fine. So it really depends on the paper and what you're using it for, and the nib and the paper and the pen.
Yeah, I guess, and that makes a lot of sense to me. Play around with paper. I wouldn't really feel like I would. I'm not seeing it as a negative for me. I mean, I've got different pens with different personalities, and I happen to like this one because it is a wet. I like that. I'm just wondering if, because it is a wet nib, should I add to that by getting a wetter kind of ink, or should I try to get a drier kind of an ink?
Sometimes it doesn't matter what kind of ink you put in it. It depends on the
sometimes it might
paper.
not.
Okay.
Well,
I'm young in this. I'm asking questions that I should.
Let me elaborate on that a little bit, because you always hear you use a drier ink, use a wetter ink. So which are the wetter inks? Which are the drier inks?
Yeah. How do you know?
How many people have said this is a wet ink, and other people say, no, that's not a wet ink, that's a drier ink, and it's back and forth and back and forth. So
I'm listening. I'm looking up something from in the chat. I'm listening. I'm just right here.
Sometimes.
Welcome, Austin.
Welcome. Sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with the flow of the pen. Sometimes it has to do with like how it lays down on the paper, and sometimes the pen will, and sometimes it will vary from pen to pen. Like I have 2 TWSBI pens here, and one is a broad nib and the other is a medium nib, and if I switch out the nibs on these, they will actually write 2 completely, totally different ways. And I think that that has to do with the manufacturer and the placement of the nibs when they're making them, and it might have something to do with the ink, but sometimes it doesn't.
Well, I do know that when I use the Clairefontaine paper, it really makes pretty much everything I use just feel like it's just flowing. I love it. I love the wet nib. I love the wet feeling paper, you know, and just, I don't want it to come across that this is a negative. I'm just curious that, you know, anyway, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I just had these.
No,
That's fine. That's what we're here for.
yeah.
Clairefontaine is really good. This is Exceed from Walmart.com, 100 GSM paper. It is also really good for fountain pen ink. I just found this at Target, 50 cents for a Unison. It's also very good. Like, I put Tatcha Murasaki Purple on it, which is a very, very wet ink. I totally thought it was going to bleed right through the page. And I left it there for an hour. And then I smeared it across and it was still wet. And it didn't bleed through the back. Like, that is my main thing. Does
that notebook say where it was manufactured? I've heard that we've gotten some really good stuff from Vietnam.
It is made in Vietnam. It's very good. The CVS Caliber notebook paper is also very good. It is also made in Vietnam. They come in like this size, where you can get loose leaf sheet paper like this, or they come in many different forms. CVS is very good.
Yeah, Dan, if what you're looking at is with a very wet pen and you're wondering about with the paper,
yeah,
experiment with papers. I do it all the time. You know, I'm using, what is it, the Right Pad?
Writing tablet from
No, Ryco.
Oh.
Ryco, the company, their stuff. And Ryco.
Okay.
And I'm using their reporter pad because I like reporter pads. And experiment, because it's funny, because you'll turn around and you will become that crazy person in Walmart looking at, you know, 35 different Mead notebooks, looking for the one that's made in the country you need it to be made in.
Right.
Because, like, I have, and I like them, and so this is the lie of the channel. My channel's a lie. I have absolutely had composition notebooks that worked great, but if I get a composition notebook and I test it out real fast and it does not work with fountain pen ink, I don't bother using it, because I know that there's so many of them that do work well that if I got a bad one, I'm going to move on.
Right.
You know? So when you pay attention, like this one I'm looking at was made in Thailand. Performs really well.
Okay.
So I pay attention to where some of the notebooks I get. I use plenty of cheap paper, but I pay attention to where my cheap paper is made because it performs different. America is the land of horrible paper.
Exactly. I mainly focus on like things that other people have said. This is Pen and Gear Memo Book from Walmart.com. Good stuff. This is Fabriano Eco Qua 85 GSM.
Fabriano is ridiculous, isn't it? It's so good.
It's so good.
How do you spell
Rhodia Dot Paper 80 GSM. Good stuff. The Birmingham Pen Company does these little, I guess you'd call them passport size 52 GSM Tomoe River paper. They're very thin paper, but they never bleed through, except for Noodler's King Philip Requiem. And CVS Caliber notebook's good. Exceed 100 GSM is very good. This is 99-cent store paper, which is terrible, but I mean, we have to have an outlier somewhere, right? And then the Lamy notebooks, they were terribly expensive. I mean, a notebook is $30.
Whoa.
I don't know. I don't understand people.
How is that? How is that Lummy notebook? You said
The booklet, the notebook is $30, but this is a booklet, and it was like $8.
so. How's
for
the
90
paper?
pages.
How's the Lummy paper?
It's 90 GSM, and it holds its own, but it has this weird ruling. It's like lined, but it's also squared. It's very strange, but it does hold up very nice to most fountain pen paper, fountain pen inks. So, and then Clairefontaine, this stuff is amazing, but it does tend to make if you swipe, I do the swipe test because I figure there are left-handed people out there that are going to look at this and they're going to be like, oh, if I swipe after 1 second, then it'll be okay. But if I wait like 5 seconds, then it might be better, but it might not also. Clairefontaine has this classic slick vellum type paper, and it's just very smeary, and you can see that. But like if you go into some of the others, they're not as bad. This really cheap 99-cent store paper, some of it is so good it almost dries instantaneously, but it does bleed through.
Bill Pemberton in the chat is asking about wetting agents. So like Van Ness White Lightning or anything to make inks wetter. And I've used the White Lightning. I didn't put it out as a review. I thought it worked very well. It does exactly what you would hope it would do, and it helps it flow really well. But Marilyn Darling did a video a while back, which then I was just curious, and which was actually made me get the White Lightning when it came out, about using dish detergent. And the thing, you can use dish detergent to help the flow of ink.
Right.
If you add something to an ink, make sure you add it very sparingly, the tiny bit of time, because you can't get it back out.
Yep. So I have a toothpick here, and I just barely tip it into the soap, and then I will put my ink sample in a separate ink sample vial, just 1 ounce of 1 milliliter of it, because they don't want to ruin the bottle or the sample or whatever, and just barely touch it to the top enough to break the surface tension. And let me tell you, it will make the most driest inks, the most uncooperative inks, so flowy and wet. I did one yesterday. It was Diamine Peach Haze, and this was a very uncooperative ink, but after I added a tiny drop of dish detergent, like you can see, it just flowed amazingly.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that helps you out, Bill. As a really good example, you know what, this will help with the question even earlier Dan had about the whole wet dry. I really like Noodler's Whaleman Sepia. It can stain a pen. It also cleans out with a little bit of effort. But when you write with it, completely untreated, it feels, I'm going to call it gritty to write with as an ink. And it can be a problem for flow in certain pens. But a tiny bit of dish detergent in a little bit of the ink, it's just the tiniest bit, and it makes the gritty feeling go away, and then you get that really nice looking ink, and it no longer, so it flows then much nicer.
The other thing that I use to make my inks wetter is Noodler's Blue Ghost. If I feel like it's being just maybe a little too dry, but it's not like not coming out of the pen, I will put a little drop of Noodler's Blue Ghost, and I'm almost out. I need to go buy some more. But this also helps with wetness issues, and it doesn't distort the ink, which is nice.
Oh, and I think I missed the second part of Bill's question. And solvents for cleaning pens. I'm hoping I'm assuming solvents, you just mean like pen flush. I
Dawn
don't
dish
use pen flush very
detergent.
often. I mostly only use water to clean a pen. And so I'm just looking at where Bill had these questions in the chat.
I only use Dawn dish detergent, and like if I'm having a really difficult time, I will put like a drop or two of ammonia in a little Dixie cup, little tiny Dixie cup, and little tiny Dixie cup like this big. Like I try not to use harsh things. The only time I've ever had to use bleach is on that Noodler's Ahab with the King Philip Requiem, and it didn't come out. So don't use harsh detergents like Clorox or any of those fancy ones with all the chemicals in it. Don't do that. You'll melt your pen. It's not a good idea. It's horrible. I've seen it. It's not good. Would not recommend. 0 out of 5 stars.